Hello, everyone. This is Cody Lee of BlackCatBooks.org, author of I the Dragon, Cruel and Beautiful, Rabbit Hole, and King Dio. With the recent release of Deltarune Episode 2, I've been really, with great interest, watching discussion of the game online and seeing people discuss the game because it kind of shows a reality that I predicted way back in 2015, like the week that Undertale came out, and the days when people were spamming message boards with claims that Undertale was one of the best games ever made, that it would go on to be an all time classic, that it was one of the best indie games ever made, that it had a great soundtrack and a great story and compelling original gameplay mechanics. People really did vehemently try and promote Undertale as being one of the best things ever. And anyone who wasn't part of like the Undertale demographic, that is like retarded, retarded Homestuck fans who didn't didn't even play video games, let alone indie games or RPGs in general. Um, Outside of that demographic, like nobody really gave a shit, and even back then. But what slowly happened over the past decade, over the past 6 years, is that Undertale has slowly but surely declined in popularity. For the first couple of years, you had people insisting that Undertale would never die, it would live on forever, it would be one of the most iconic games ever made. The year after that, there were fewer and fewer of these people, and by 2020, I would say, Undertale was completely a shell of its former self. You might see a handful of people coming out and saying that, like, oh, I liked Undertale when it first came out, but by and large, like, Undertale has had no lasting appeal the way that, like, the truly engaging, interesting games from that time period went on to have. Stuff like Breath of the Wild, stuff like Splatoon, stuff like all the really good Nintendo games from that period, right? Like, Undertale was a fad. Like, it was the definition of a fad, in which it had a very, very big following initially due to reasons unrelated to the game itself, due to Toby Fox's associations with like high profile creators in like the SJW sphere, right? And that bled over into like legitimate gaming communities. But Undertale was rather quickly filtered by the fact that it wasn't a very good game. It wasn't interesting. It wasn't unique. It wasn't creative. It wasn't funny. And when you take away these people, right? When you take away these people who were just rabid about Undertale, obsessed about Undertale, it has no appeal. And I think that's the main reason people from the beginning were so adamant, like talking about like the fan base as opposed to the game itself, right? Oh man, Undertale. People only hate Undertale because of the fan base. Well, no, Undertale is only known because of the fan base. If it wasn't for the fan base spamming Undertale related media everywhere, from like porn to fan fiction to ridiculous fan theories. Like nobody would have acknowledged it at all as a legitimate, interesting game. The only thing of value that under the only positive quality Undertale ever had was the fan base and just how willing they were to go to bat for this thing, to promote it and like say it's the best thing ever. But and here's the thing though, like over the past 6 years, those people have grown up. They have moved on. They have moved on to shilling other products. They have continued, like I think a lot of those people like are Rick and Morty fans. Like they're consuming other media and they're not their putting all of their attention on Toby Fox and Undertale. And what does that mean? Well, the thing is, the thing that people aren't really noticing, at least not yet, is that Deltarune is nowhere near as popular as Undertale. Toby Toby Fox, in his infinite wisdom, thought that he would be able to like milk Undertale forever by making Deltarune the sequel episodic, right? So he kind of took the Final Fantasy VII R approach and just made a really shitty sequel game, like with a lot of the same characters, with a different setting and stuff like that. It tried like milking his naive idiot audience, right? Deltarune Episode One got a little bit of attention, like a tiny little bit, nowhere near as much as the first game. But Episode Two, nobody cares, right? Like I actually just looked at YouTube and just looked at like comparisons between like YouTube views and and stuff like that. The only people getting a lot of attention covering Deltarune are big YouTubers who are already covering games like this already, right? Like this is their niche, right? Like, oh man, Undertale. Um, by and large, like the days of like people getting a ton of views, making Undertale fan content and making like songs or re-uploading Toby Fox's music. Like those days are over, right? Undertale, Deltarune is declining in popularity. Like it's not the hot new thing anymore, and as a result of that, like it has no appeal because there are no positive qualities to the actual game itself, right? It did not keep people interested. They have moved on, and it will only get worse from here. Nobody, nobody played Undertale for the gameplay, for the characters, for the story, for the world. Like they played it because it was popular, and with Deltarune not being nearly as popular, it's only going to be a matter of time until people start acknowledging that, like, wow, either I liked Undertale better, or maybe Undertale wasn't that good to begin with. I think it would. I think the latter is way more likely. I think people will start acknowledging that, like, yeah, maybe Toby Fox isn't that very good of a game developer. Maybe he's not that much of a talent. Maybe he doesn't. Maybe he's not actually someone that's worthy of like godlike status. I've never seen someone like be worshipped as much as Toby Fox for such a mediocre release. There's nothing special about what Toby Fox did, right? Like I've always said that, and I don't say this often, but I was right. Like I was completely right about everything. Like I knew that Undertale was a fad and that it would not stay relevant, and that is exactly what we're seeing with this release, Deltarune Episode Two.